Mallory Snap's first thought as she stepped through the shimmering stink curtain of the Snark's Dominion's war chamber was simply, "Smells like a barbecue hosted by Satan's armpit." And her second was, "Why is that throne made entirely of shin bones? Is FEMA furniture out of style?" She squinted through the hazy fog of testosterone and expired doomspice, boots echoing against obsidian tiles, slick with some sort of ceremonial goop that probably wasn't vegan-friendly, and whispered to herself, "God, I miss paperwork." Around her, 12 Snark's warriors, each the approximate size and mood of a possessed refrigerator, stood in a tight formation that screamed, "Unresolved trauma in 4K." One of them belched a cloud of acidic pheromones that triggered a fire alert on Mallory's wrist comb, prompting her to mutter, "Lovely. Now I'm marinated." And then came the voice, raspy, phlegm-coated, and sounding like it gargled gravel and daddy issues. "The human approaches to parley or perish." Mallory halted 3 feet from a towering lizard thing wrapped in what looked suspiciously like a tablecloth of scalped enemy banners. Overlord Blarg the Crunchmaster, Snark's Emperor, head of the War Council, and according to a footnote in her briefing, allergic to garlic, raised his blood scepter and declared, "You are the sacrifice Earth has offered for diplomatic dissolution." Mallory tilted her head, held up a laminated card with "Diplomat" in Comic Sans, and replied, "Actually, I'm the Navy SEAL they sent after your previous guy spontaneously combusted from stress, and I brought muffins." Gasps, audible, ones. One warrior in the back fainted, probably from gluten confusion. "You mock our traditions with carbohydrates," Blarg thundered. Mallory smiled sweetly and stepped forward like a preschool teacher with a flamethrower. "No, I'm respecting your traditions by pretending they're worth my time." This prompted the immediate growl of Crunk, the Snark's executioner of rituals and excess squats, who flexed his neck until 3 veins achieved sentience. "She smells of insolence," he snarled. Mallory leaned in just enough to make him twitch. "That's called deodorant. Earth discovered it in 2043. You're welcome." With protocol officially torched and the mood swerving hard into awkward brunch with carnivores, the ceremonial challenge was laid: survive 3 trials of ritual combat, and Earth wouldn't be served as a side dish at the next galactic genocide. Decline, and the Snarks would consider it culinary forfeiture. Mallory cracked her knuckles, holstered her sarcasm with a grin, and tossed her duffel bag at the nearest ceremonial altar, knocking over a bowl of something that screamed when it hit the floor. "3 trials, huh? You boys really into foreplay, aren't you?" The High Priest of Conflict coughed up his monocle. "You must prepare for Trial 1. The dance of bone-shattering blades." Mallory unzipped her jacket, revealing a tank top that read, "Let's get diplomatic," with knives. She glanced around the chamber, now bristling with weapons, tension, and the unmistakable odor of a people who'd skipped every emotional development checkpoint in evolutionary history. "Well," she said, stretching like she was prepping for beach volleyball, "time to see if you rage lizards know how to take a compliment. Or a concussion." With that, the floor beneath her cracked open, revealing an arena etched in the glowing runes of 1,000 extinguished civilizations, and what was almost definitely a Taco Bell logo. Drums began to pound, a massive gate lifted, and from the shadows, Crunk emerged, shirtless, growling and dual-wielding plasma axes like a toddler denied nap time. Mallory rolled her shoulders, smiled like someone who'd just realized the enemy hadn't read the fine print of her psychological warfare manual, and whispered to herself, "Welcome to the diplomatic barbecue, you overgrown iguana. Let's cook." Crunk charged like a wounded tank full of emotional baggage, plasma axes crackling with the kind of energy typically reserved for vengeful exes and over-caffeinated gym rats. Mallory sidestepped with an almost lazy grace, flipping over his swing, like a gymnast in tactical leggings, and landed with a smirk so sharp it could have cut through his childhood trauma. "Hey, Crunk," she called, spinning her neural baton like a sarcastic majorette. "Too much hip thrust in that swing. Makes it look like you're proposing, and frankly, I'm not ready for that level of commitment. Crunk paused mid-pivot, blinked, twice, asynchronously, and let out a confused grunt that may have also been a whimper. The Snark's war priests frowned. Audience murmurs rippled like gossip at a funeral. She was supposed to be screaming, bleeding, or ideally both. Instead, she was critiquing his murder form like a personal trainer with too much attitude and a background in counterinsurgency. Mallory ducked his next axe swing, jabbed her baton into his armpit and chirped, "Fun fact, did you know there's a pressure point here that makes you temporarily forget algebra?" Crunk collapsed like a tree made of biceps and regret. Laughter, real, confused, slightly terrified laughter, bubbled from him. "You are confusing," he admitted from the floor, twitching like a faulty air fryer. "Thanks. It's the sarcasm and the creatine." She twirled the baton once more and turned to the officiating warlord with a crisp, "Round 1 complete. Who's next on the moist lizard docket?" Gate 2 opened with a hiss and a gratuitous fog machine burst, revealing Zilla, part serpent goddess, part electro-whip specialist, and fully aware of her own aesthetic. Her chrome-plated scales shimmered under the torchlight like someone dipped a Lamborghini in glitter and fury. "I will break you," she purred, lashes fluttering like a weaponized fan dance. "Neat," Mallory said, holstering her baton. "Before we start, just a quick thing. Your scale game? Absolutely radiant. What's the maintenance routine? Oil? Wax? Some kind of nano serum?" Zilla blinked. "I exfoliate daily and use crushed meteorites in my polish." Mallory nodded solemnly, stepping sideways as a whip snapped inches from her face. "You can taste the effort, seriously. If murder doesn't work out, you've got a future in galactic beauty consulting." Zilla's expression faltered. The next lash came slower, and missed by design. "Do you also moisturize?" "Post-battle?" Mallory asked, circling casually as if they were discussing brunch menus, not Mortal Kombat. "Because that shimmer says, hydrated." 10 minutes later, the arena resembled a bizarre TED Talk where 2 apex predators discussed hydration, heat-resistant conditioners, and the psychological impact of poor lighting on scale luster. Mallory even offered a sample packet of human-grade aloe and mentioned it came with SPF 90. "You're disarming her," hissed one of the guards into his communicator, staring at the 2 warriors now mid-discussion about foot care under high gravity conditions. "She's destabilizing Zilla? With friendship?" Overlord Blarg gripped the arms of his shinbone throne hard enough to splinter femurs. This is heresy," he muttered, while his chef nervously adjusted the ceremonial sauce tray. Meanwhile, Zilla, mid-stretch, giggled, like someone who'd just found a surprise moisturizer sample in her death bag. "We'll fight later," she announced to the crowd. "First we brunch." The audience, confused, aroused, horrified, erupted into awkward applause. Mallory turned, eyebrows raised, as if to say, "What did I tell you?" and cracked her neck in the direction of the final gate, now pulsing with ominous red glyphs, and the kind of energy that says something inside probably killed its therapist. The arena dimmed. Drums slowed. A choir of background monks hit an unnerving minor chord as the last contestant emerged. Tharn the Emotionless. 12 feet tall, scarred from orbital to surface re-entries, and allegedly responsible for the extinction of at least 4 feel-good species. He didn't walk. He glided, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Probably didn't know how to smile without structural collapse. "I will end your lineage," he said, voice like black hole static. Mallory tilted her head. "Buddy, I barely survived my sister's wedding." "You think you scare me?" Tharn raised a hand, claws twitching. Lightning pulsed. Arena stones trembled. Mallory didn't flinch. Instead, she lowered her baton, exhaled, and stepped toward him. Slowly, deliberately, like a woman about To ruin 1,000 years of war culture with one inconvenient truth and maybe a soup recipe. Ever think the reason you're so angry is because no one ever asked if you wanted to be? She said softly, eyes locked on his. The silence that followed was a vacuum, pure, unfiltered existential awkwardness. Tharn's claws paused, mid-clench. He began, but the words crumbled. Mallory moved closer. You're not a weapon. You're a person. You don't have to keep doing this. You can rest. Something broke behind his eyes. No tears, just a shudder. Like a tectonic plate finally admitting it's tired. Tharn sat down. Not fell. Sat. The audience screamed. Several priests fainted. A ceremonial bugle deflated itself in despair. I'm tired, Tharn whispered, voice hollow. Mallory nodded and reached into her pack. Then help me make soup. Your people need more than conquest. They need cumin. From the throne, Blarg roared, This is dishonor. This is blasphemy. This actually smells amazing. Because while everyone else stared, Tharn had begun slicing root vegetables with military precision, and Mallory was heating broth with a pocket flamethrower labeled Emergency Gumbo Unit. In the stands, Crunk was crying into a napkin. Zilla was live streaming on something called Snarks Talk, and Mallory was grinning like the chaos was finally bending in her direction, because she wasn't just cooking, she was converting. One ladle at a time. Tharn diced onions like he'd once dismembered planetary governors, precise, emotionless, yet somehow healing. Mallory stood beside him, ladling broth with the smug serenity of someone who'd weaponized comfort food, stirring the pot, like it owed her rent while the rest of the arena watched in stunned silence. Overlord Blarg trembled atop his shin-bone throne, claws twitching, ceremonial monocle fogged with confusion and fury. This cannot be, he barked, voice cracking. Like an overcooked steak. You are destroying our sacred rituals with simmering. You are undermining millennia of glorious combat with bouillon cubes. Mallory didn't look up. Correction. I'm rebranding your murder circus into a Michelin-starred trauma recovery center. Now pass the pepper, not the poison kind. The cracked black kind. We're making something bold but nuanced. Crunk, now donning a tiny apron that read bench press the flavor, passed her the grinder with 2 fingers and a sniffle. Zilla, mid-manicure with her electro-whips coiled like fancy serpents, leaned in from the side, whispering, Do you think we can add truffle oil? Mallory smiled. Only if you want your enemies to weep from flavor. That was the moment. Right. Then, that the Snarks High Council detonated its emergency protocol, Operation Honor Purge. The arena's floor split open, revealing a sky platform above, bristling with cannon turrets and an entire wing of the Honor Guard, Snark's elite zealots, raised in isolation chambers on a diet of protein paste and Shakespearean vengeance. They descended like a furious swarm of meat meteors, each shouting things like, For the Code! And death to flavorful treason. Mallory's ladle paused mid-stir. Well, that escalated faster than my last blind date. Tharn stood. Slowly, floral garnish in one claw, soup spoon in the other. I'll handle the ones on the left, he said, voice now soft but dangerous. No one threatens my bisque. Mallory wiped her hands, cracked her neck, and unholstered her neural baton with the weariness of someone annoyed to be interrupted mid-reduction. Fine, she sighed, eyeing the honor guard mid-leap. Guess it's time for dinner and a show. What followed was chaos, cuisine, and high-velocity philosophy. Crunk hurled a soup cauldron like a mortar shell, knocking 3 zealots into a vat of ceremonial fondue. Zilla spun midair, using her electro-whips to lasso attackers into glittering nets of judgment and sass. Mallory ducked a plasma halberd, jabbed her baton into the knee of a zealot yelling death first, and replied, Okay, but have you tried brunch? Blasters fired. Blades clanged. And in the middle of it all, Tharn plated his latest dish under fire, muttering, "The garnish must survive. It defines the plate." Mallory flipped over a collapsing war drum, landed in a kneel, and jabbed her finger at the overhead speakers. "Blar, I know you're listening, you calcium-humping fossil. Call them off before I turn your sacred arena into a 5-star open kitchen. Spoiler alert, your ceremonial altar makes a perfect charcuterie board." There was static. Then, the guttural wheeze of a despot unhinged. You think this insubordination soup will undo the legacy of the Snarks? We were born in blood, raised in fire, and marinated in conquest." Mallory sighed. "That explains the smell. Look, Blar, no one's saying you can't still be terrifying. Just be terrifying with flavor." Another explosion rocked the chamber. The soup pot flipped. Silence fell. Krunk caught the pot mid-air. Tharn caught the ladle. Zilla caught, a falling zealot by the ankle, and whispered, "Moisturize." Then came the sound no Snarks had heard in centuries. Applause. One of the younger guards, a junior war auditor named Vibble, clapped, tentative at first, then joined by another. Then 20. Then a full cheer that rose like a tidal wave of confused culinary enlightenment. Blarg's voice boomed once more, this time raw with existential dread. "You've infected them. You've sautéed their souls. And you're next, big guy," Mallory grinned, pointing her baton at the throne like it was a dessert fork. "Because this isn't just diplomacy anymore. This is a movement." But even as the momentum shifted and warriors set down their weapons for ladles, a shadow passed overhead. The Snark's orbital dreadnought Fury Casserole had moved into firing position, targeting the arena with enough firepower to crisp the entire planet. "Oh, Mallory growled. "Someone up there thinks this is still about domination." Tharn stepped beside her. "What now?" She pulled out a flare gun labeled Emergency Party Signal and fired it into the air. "Now," she said, locking eyes with the dreadnought on the horizon. "Now we cater." The flare burst above the arena like a drunken firework with confidence issues, crackling in brilliant pinks and aggressive chartreuse, painting the sky with a signal so gaudy it could only mean one thing in Earth tactical code: surprise potluck. "Underway, bring forks and emotional baggage." The Fury Casserole hung above like an angry cloud with laser eczema, its ventral plasma arrays charging with the subtlety of a toddler's tantrum. Mallory tilted her head toward the sky, squinting. "They really brought the planet killer to a dinner party." "Cute," she muttered, casually dusting off Tharn's shoulder like an annoyed sous chef prepping for a Michelin star review while the building was on fire. Below, Zilla handed out steaming skewers of crisis kebab to the recovering honor guard, some of whom had already begun rating the presentation on anonymous battlefield food forums. Krunk flexed dramatically while stirring the backup gumbo, every rep an act of culinary defiance. "Okay, team," Mallory called out, voice amplified by the arena's emergency intercom. "Looks like Big Bertha's hangry. So we're doing this Earth style. We're gonna feed 'em until they either cry, convert, or combust. I want seasoning stations, food plating squads, and someone teach Vibble how to use a whisk without stabbing it." Vibble saluted and immediately whisked himself into a concussion. Progress. The overhead dreadnought's comms opened with the shrill crackle of someone trying to assert dominance while chewing a lemon rind. "This is Admiral Slore of the Wrathful Nutritional Enforcement Fleet. You have 30 seconds to cease your blasphemous culinary heresy or be reduced to flavorful particles." Mallory clicked her mic and replied with the calm of a yoga instructor about to throw hands. "Hi, Slore, Malsnap, Navy SEAL, Earth diplomatic chef, and your worst nightmare in an apron. We're currently engaged in what we call tactical nourishment. You want to fire on this arena? Fine. But you'll be destroying the galaxy's first interspecies chili cook-off, and that makes you the bad guy in every food documentary ever." Silence. A long, awkward, sweaty silence. Then, "Prepare for orbital bombardment," Tharn growled. "Permission to garnish his bridge with his own stupidity." "Granted," Mallory said, already opening her emergency cookbook protocols. "Operation
Taste buds is go." She jammed her wrist comm against the arena's central altar and rerouted its ancient war signal arrays into a full broadcast galactic cooking livestream. Banners flared into life, displaying intergalactic peace through show.
pressure cooking across 17,000 inhabited systems in 60 languages, 5 of which were scented. Across the galaxy, bored civilians, warlords, politicians, and at least one sentient waterbed tuned in to watch a human, a reformed war god, a glamazon lizard, and a protein-brained himbo prep fusion meals on what used to be a battlefield. Ratings spiked, and so did diplomatic confusion. "Wait," muttered a Glibnor senator mid-squid massage. "Are we losing the war to a soup?" "No, sir," his aide replied. "We're losing to a brand." Up above, the Fury casserole hesitated, long enough for Zilla to launch her next move. With a flick of her tail and a whip crack, she launched the ceremonial banquet platter. Skyward, an ornate disc covered in what the Snarks once used to carry enemy heads, now repurposed to deliver steaming, weapon-grade Trellin root ravioli with empathy glaze. The platter hit the viewport of the dreadnought with a resonating thump, leaving a smear of sauce and cultural crisis. Inside, Admiral Slore stared as his entire bridge crew began licking the glass. "Sir," said his tactical officer mid-sniff, "it smells like home and garlic." Slore's eyes twitched. "No, we are Snarks. We devour, we don't braise." But even he faltered when the next wave hit. Dozens of drones launched from the arena, each carrying samplers, recipe scrolls, and complimentary seasoning sachets marked, "With love, from Earth." One drone hovered before the bridge, played a clip of Than calmly filleting a grief beast while explaining flavor layering, then winked, and launched a breadstick through the vent shaft like a carbohydrate assassin. Back on the ground, Mallory took a long sip of fermented tea, watching as the dreadnought's glow flickered and dimmed. "And that, kids," she said, "is what we call tactical umami." Crunk raised a protein shake in salute. "It's like war, but delicious." Zilla nodded, fixing her lip gloss with the smoldering grace of a woman who had just conquered a death fleet with lasagna. "I believe we call this domination à la carte." Tharn plated one final dish, steam rising around his now peaceful face. "The battle is not won, but the appetite is awakened." Then came the hail. The Fury casserole called back. "This is Admiral Slore." The voice came through, choked with emotional indigestion. We wish to discuss a ceasefire, and possibly your casserole recipe." Mallory raised her wrist, tapped in her most sincere tone, and replied, "Only if you're ready to stop fighting and start seasoning." Across the arena, warriors wept, clapped, embraced. Soup spilled like wine, and for the first time in centuries, the Snarks did not roar in battle. They roared in applause. The Fury casserole descended slowly, awkwardly, like a dinner guest arriving late with nothing but questions and a half-eaten apology, its hull scarred with pride and marinara. Admiral Slore stepped onto the arena platform flanked by his top officers, each one twitchy, confused, and slightly undercooked from emotional exposure. The audience, now a stew of ex-warlords and half-braided death cultists, stared in tense silence as the most feared fleet commander in Snark's history reached Mallory Snap and extended a hand holding a lemon zester. Mallory raised one brow. Declaration of surrender or passive-aggressive hint about the sauce? Slore cleared his throat. "Both," he said, eyes darting to the table where Tharn plated. Another tray of bite-sized tartlets, shaped like historical war blunders. "I would like to request a demonstration, and possibly seconds. Cheers broke out so suddenly that Vibble fainted again, this time from joy. Crunk caught him, whispering, "It's okay, little whisk goblin. War is over. Now we brunch." In the hours that followed, the arena transformed into something almost mythical. War banners repurposed into table runners, ritual gongs used as serving trays, plasma axes wielded only to crack open celebratory shellfish. Even the honor guard, formerly disciples of dismemberment, now conducted synchronized salad, tossing with terrifying precision. Zilla debuted her skincare-infused dessert line, crème brûlée. Tharn gave a heartfelt speech about seasoning, and in a piece that made 3 diplomats from the Glibner Confederacy sob until they coughed up ink. Crunk ran a protein bar and lifted 2 alien children at once for autographs, screaming, "High reps for peace," with the enthusiasm of a reformed protein cultist. Mallory, now wearing a grease-streaked apron reading "Peace Through Grease," stood beside Slore and handed him a tasting spoon. He tried the truffle bisque. His eyelids fluttered like war flags, surrendering to buttery diplomacy. And then he burped. Softly. Reverently. "We were wrong," he murmured. "Earth is not weak. Earth is emotionally aggressive. With seasoning." Mallory nodded. "We call it the flavor doctrine, also known as Article 4, Thou shalt not underestimate a seal with a crock-pot and childhood baggage." Beyond the arena, things began to shift. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Snark's fleet had rerouted to start culinary exchanges with former enemies. Siege cruisers were now roving food stations. Hostile outposts became fusion diners. One outpost called the Tactical. Tapenade had just launched a peace deal over tapas. At the United Galactic Council, chaos reigned. A crisis summit devolved into open sobbing after an Earth ambassador brought fresh garlic bread. They're emotionally disarming and tire. "Species with comfort food," one analyst howled. "We can't shoot empathy," Mallory beamed through the broadcast, "but you can marinate in it." The final proof came when the Hejarn Triarchy, 3-headed, 3-hearted, and historically allergic to sincerity, accepted Mallory's invitation to the Friendship Fricassee, formerly the Snark's Command Center, now a 5-star floating restaurant with flamethrower fondue and side-eye sommeliers. The Hejarn delegation arrived bristling with suspicion and weapons, and within 15 minutes, one of the heads was weeping over the Trellin root casserole. This dish," it croaked. "This was served by my grandmother before our last civil war." The second head whispered, "I remember." "The spice?" The third asked, "Can we have the recipe?" Mallory stepped forward, apron dusted in hope and cayenne. "You can have all the recipes," she said, placing the ancient ladle of Snark's ritual into their trembling hands. "But first, dessert. Tonight we serve existential pie." Later, as stars shimmered outside the converted battlecruiser and laughter echoed off once bloody walls, Mallory sat with Tharn, Zilla, and Crunk at the chef's table. The war god now calmly arranging microgreens, the beauty lizard posting her latest video tutorial on de-escalation skincare. Crunk teaching toddlers how to stir while flexing unnecessarily. "You realize," Tharn said quietly, "you've done what no weapon ever could. You made peace taste good." Mallory leaned back, stretched, and looked out at a galaxy, no longer bracing for war, but setting tables. "Turns out," she said, swirling her wine, "hospitality is just tactical empathy served warm." A final toast clinked through the room. To leftovers, to healing, to Earth's most dangerous export, sincerity with seasoning. And so the war ended not with a surrender, not with an explosion, but with a perfectly timed belch and a shared recipe card.